First Contact Protocols. The celestial Concordate survey vessel Eternal Harmony drifted at the edge of an unremarkable solar system, its crystalline sensors extended like delicate fractals into space. Supreme Observer Nexel. Their iridescent scales, shifting in patterns of mild annoyance, studied the preliminary scans with growing confusion. Impossible, they muttered, their auxiliary brain clusters struggling to process the contradictory data. Run the analysis again. The ship's quantum intelligence hummed in acknowledgement, its crystalline matrices reconfiguring to perform another sweep. The results remained unchanged. A vessel of unknown configuration was approaching their position, and it defied every classification protocol in the Concordate's vast databases. The vessel appears to be using both fusion and antimatter propulsion simultaneously, reported Second Observer Calyx, their tendrils weaving complex patterns of bewilderment. The hull composition is, Environmental Officer. Please verify these readings. Environmental Officer Zara, the only organic member of the senior staff who hadn't undergone extensive cybernetic enhancement, leaned forward to examine the data. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, each specialized for different wavelengths of light. Confirmed. The hull appears to be a living metal composite. It's adapting to local space conditions in real time. Primitive species don't develop living metal technology, Nexel stated flatly. Check the historical records. This system was surveyed 300 cycles ago. The dominant species was still burning hydrocarbons for energy. The dominant species was humanity, Zara corrected, pulling up the archived footage. And according to our last survey, they had just achieved rudimentary spaceflight using chemical propulsion. The approaching vessel suddenly altered its course, executing a maneuver that should have torn it apart. Instead, the living metal hull rippled like muscle tissue, absorbing and redistributing the gravitational forces. "They're hailing us," announced the communications array, its crystalline spires vibrating in harmony. The signal is audio-visual. How charmingly archaic. Display, ordered Nexel, their scales now showing patterns of scientific curiosity, despite their obvious disdain. The holofield shimmered and resolved into the image of a human female. Her dark skin contrasted sharply with the white uniform she wore, and her eyes held an intensity that made even Nexel's cybernetically regulated emotional centers uncomfortable. Celestial Concordate vessel, this is Captain Maya Chen of the Earth ship Prometheus. We apologize for any alarm our approach may have caused. We've been exploring this sector for several months, and we're excited to finally encounter another spacefaring civilization. Nexel's auxiliary brain clusters worked overtime to process this statement. Several months. Your species achieved faster than light travel in just 300 cycles. Captain Chen's expression shifted slightly. Was that amusement? Actually, we achieved FTL travel about 50 years ago. But we've been busy since then. Impossible. Nexel declared again, their scales now showing patterns of agitation. The technological progression models are clear. No species advances from chemical propulsion to FTL in such a short time span. The sociological implications alone. Would you like to come aboard and see for yourself? Chen interrupted, still wearing that slight smile. We'd be happy to give you a tour. Our ship's design is unconventional by most standards, but we found that seeing is believing. Before Nexel could refuse such an undignified proposal, Zara spoke up. We would be honored, Captain Chen. Our shuttle can dock with compatible airlock systems. Excellent, Chen responded. Though I should warn you, we don't use airlocks. We have something a bit different. Stand by for transport coordinates. As the transmission ended, Nexel turned to Zara in disbelief. Environmental Officer, you've exceeded your authority. These humans are clearly violating natural progression laws. They should be quarantined and studied from a safe distance until we understand how they've achieved these technological anomalies. Zara's 4 eyes focused on her superior. With respect, Supreme Observer, I believe rigid adherence to progression models is exactly why we've never encountered a species quite like humanity before. They don't follow our rules because they don't know them. And perhaps that's their greatest strength. Before Nexel could respond, new data flooded their sensors. The human ship was changing. Its living metal hull was reconfiguring itself, forming structures that defied conventional engineering principles. It was as if the vessel was less a machine and more a living organism, adapting and evolving to meet new challenges. "Fascinating," whispered Calyx, their tendrils now moving in patterns of pure scientific wonder. They've somehow merged biological principles with technological advancement. Instead of replacing organic systems with superior mechanical ones as we did, they've enhanced them. "Transport coordinates received," announced the communications array. "They're using some form of quantum entanglement system we've never encountered before. It appears to be based on biological neural patterns rather than artificial matrices." Nexel's scales shifted through patterns of resignation, curiosity, and something approaching excitement. Perhaps Zora was right. Perhaps it was time for the Concordat to learn some new rules. "Very well," they announced. "Prepare for contact, and update our first contact protocols. It seems they may need some revision." As the preparation began, Zara smiled to herself. She had a feeling the Concordat was about to discover that the universe was far more interesting and far less predictable than their models had ever suggested. The art of war reimagined. The interior of the Prometheus defied every expectation Nexel had formed about human technology. Instead of the sterile mechanical environment typical of advanced spacecraft, they found themselves walking through what appeared to be a living ecosystem. Living metal walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, while carefully engineered plants served multiple functions throughout the vessel. "Your entire ship is alive?" Calyx asked, their tendrils waving in fascination as they analyzed the surrounding environment. Captain Chen nodded, leading them through a corridor where crew members were engaged in what appeared to be a synchronized dance routine. "We learned early on that the best technology doesn't fight nature, it works with it. Every system on this ship is designed to mimic and enhance natural processes. But this is a warship, is it not?" Nexel's scales shifted in confusion. "Where are your weapon systems? Your tactical arrays?" Chen's smile held a hint of mystery. "They're all around you. Those dancers. They're maintaining the ship's quantum field alignment through precise movements based on natural harmonic frequencies. The plants don't just provide oxygen. They're part of our defensive systems." Before Nexel could process this information, alarms blared throughout both vessels. The Eternal Harmony's quantum intelligence reported multiple unknown ships emerging from faster-than-light travel nearby. "Raiders," Zora identified, her 4 eyes narrowing. "The Swarm Collective. They've been attacking research vessels in this sector for months." "Hostile vessels approaching," announced the Prometheus's artificial intelligence, its voice carrying unusual emotional undertones. 3 swarm carriers detected, launching combat drones. Nexel's auxiliary brain clusters nearly overloaded trying to process the transformation that followed. The Prometheus's living metal hull began to shift and flow like liquid, while the plant life throughout the ship pulsed with strange energies. "Combat configuration active," Chen announced calmly. "Would you like to observe from our tactical center? It might help you understand our approach to warfare." The tactical center was unlike anything the Concordat observers had ever seen. Instead of traditional display screens and control interfaces, the room was dominated by a living garden of crystalline growths that somehow displayed tactical information through changing colors and patterns. "The swarm uses silicon-based drone ships controlled by distributed intelligence," Zara reported, reading data from her own systems. "Their tactical advantage lies in overwhelming numbers and perfect coordination. Standard doctrine would be to retreat and call for reinforcements," Nexel added. "Their drone networks cannot be defeated by conventional means." Chen's smile widened. Who said anything about conventional? She turned to her crew. "Initialize the Gaia protocol." The crystalline garden in the tactical center suddenly erupted with new growth, forming complex geometric patterns that somehow translated into ship movements. The Prometheus began moving in ways that should have been impossible, its living metal hull rippling and flowing to match the natural patterns displayed in the tactical garden. You see, Chen explained as her ship danced between swarms of enemy drones, the swarm's greatest strength is their perfect mathematical coordination. But nature isn't perfect, it's adaptive. We don't try to match their precision. We introduce controlled chaos into the system. The observers watched in amazement as the Prometheus released clouds of what appeared to be organic spores into space. The swarm drones, programmed to analyze and counter any threat, immediately began adapting their behavior to deal with what their systems identified as a biological weapon. Those spores, Calyx observed, they're not actually weapons, are they? They're harmless, Chen confirmed. But the swarm doesn't know that. They're wasting energy and processing power adapting to a threat that doesn't exist, while the Prometheus suddenly activated what appeared to be organic growth patterns across its hull, generating quantum field distortions that mimicked natural space phenomena. The swarm drones, their systems overwhelmed trying to process too many variables at once, began to lose their perfect coordination. "This is impossible," Nexel whispered, their scales showing patterns of pure astonishment. "You're not just fighting them, you're making them fight themselves." "Nature's greatest lesson," Chen said as her ship moved in for the killing blow, its organic weapons systems finally revealing their true purpose. Sometimes the most effective strategy isn't to be stronger or faster, but to make your opponent's strength work against them. The battle ended not with a dramatic explosion, but with the swarm drones falling into disarray, their distributed intelligence network overwhelmed by trying to process too many organic variables at once. The carriers, their drone forces in chaos, retreated into faster-than-light travel. "You understand now?" Chen asked the stunned observers. "Why we build our ships this way? Technology doesn't have to mean abandoning our connection to nature. Sometimes the most advanced solution is remembering what evolution spent billions of years perfecting." Zara's 4 eyes were shining with excitement. "Your entire approach to warfare, it's based on ecological principles rather than mathematical optimization. Life has been solving complex problems since the first cell divided," Chen agreed. "We just learned to listen to those solutions instead of trying to engineer completely new ones." As the Prometheus's systems returned to their normal configuration, Nexel found their rigid worldview continuing to shift. The humans hadn't just developed advanced technology. They'd found a completely different path to advancement, one that embraced complexity and imperfection rather than trying to eliminate it. "Perhaps," they said slowly, their scales showing patterns of deep thought, "the Concordat has much to learn from humanity." "Oh, you have no idea," Chen replied, and this time her smile held a promise of even greater wonders to come. Dancing with stars. The aftermath of the battle brought no rest. As the Prometheus's living systems repaired themselves using principles borrowed from cellular regeneration, urgent transmissions arrived from Concordat space. The swarm collective wasn't retreating. They were gathering for something bigger. 7 carrier groups detected at the edge of the Helios sector, reported Zora, her 4 eyes rapidly processing data streams from Concordat sensors. "They're not just coordinating attacks anymore. They're evolving." The tactical garden displayed the situation in living color, crystal formations growing and shifting to represent fleet movements. The swarm's drone ships were adapting, their silicon-based intelligence incorporating lessons from their defeat. Captain Chen studied the patterns with an expression that surprised her alien observers. She was smiling. "They're learning," she said. "Good. That's exactly what we wanted." Nexel's scales rippled with alarm patterns. "You intentionally showed them your capabilities. Our tactical models indicate this will reduce your combat effectiveness by 67%. Your models assume we'll use the same tactics twice." Chen gestured to her crew, who had already begun what looked like a strange combination of Tai Chi and mathematical calculations. "Humanity survived because we never stopped evolving. Why should our combat doctrine be any different? The Eternal Harmony's quantum intelligence suddenly reported a new development. The swarm carriers were deploying something new, hybrid drones that incorporated organic principles into their design. They were attempting to copy humanity's approach. Fascinating, Calyx observed, their tendrils weaving complex patterns of scientific excitement. They've analyzed your biodaptive technology and created the synthetic analog. By conventional logic, they should now be able to counter your advantages. Conventional logic, Chen replied, assumes that what they saw was our technology's true purpose. She turned to her crew. Initialize Protocol Fibonacci. The Prometheus's internal architecture began to change. The living metal walls flowed like liquid, rearranging themselves in patterns that seemed random at first glance, but held a deeper mathematical beauty. The engineered plants throughout the ship started producing new compounds, releasing them into carefully designed circulation systems. What you saw in our last battle, Chen explained as her ship transformed around them, wasn't our combat technology. It was our teaching technology. The tactical garden erupted with new growth, displaying information in patterns that made Nexel's auxiliary brain clusters ache trying to process them. The swarm's hybrid drones were approaching in formation, their movements mimicking the organic unpredictability they had witnessed before. They think they've learned to be unpredictable, Chen continued. But they're still thinking like machines, trying to generate pseudo-random patterns based on mathematical models. They don't understand that true biological adaptation isn't about randomness. It's about harmony. The Prometheus began to move, but not like before. Instead of chaotic, unpredictable movements, it flowed through space with a grace that seemed impossible for something its size. Every motion connected to the next in a perfect sequence that reminded Zora of ancient dance forms she had studied in humanity's cultural database. The golden ratio, she whispered in sudden understanding. Your ship's movements, they're following natural growth patterns. Life doesn't just evolve to survive, Chen confirmed as the Prometheus executed a series of maneuvers that looked deceptively simple, yet somehow defied the swarm's attempts to predict them. It evolves to create beauty. Efficiency isn't about using the least energy. It's about using energy in harmony with the universe around you. The hybrid drones, for all their advanced technology, couldn't adapt to what they were seeing. Their attempts to mimic organic unpredictability made them vulnerable to the Prometheus's true strength. The ability to move in perfect harmony with natural laws that machines could copy but never truly understand. Your ship, Calyx observed with growing excitement, it's not just using biological principles, it's expressing them, like a dance that's also a weapon, a flower that's also a fortress. The battle that followed wasn't just a display of military might. It was a demonstration of evolution's greatest achievement. The swarm's hybrid drones, trying to process and counter movements based on millions of years of natural development, found themselves caught in the complex web of interconnected systems that made life itself possible. You let them copy your surface technology, Nexel realized, their scales showing patterns of profound respect, knowing they could never replicate the underlying principles without truly understanding life itself. Understanding isn't the same as wisdom, Chen agreed as the Prometheus's living weapons engaged the enemy. They learned to mimic life without learning why life works the way it does, without understanding that true strength comes from being part of something larger than yourself. As the hybrid drones fell into disarray, unable to maintain their coordination against an enemy that moved like a force of nature itself, Zara understood something profound about humanity. They hadn't just survived because they were adaptable. They had thrived because they never lost their connection to the fundamental patterns that governed life itself. The swarm carriers retreated again, leaving behind disabled drones that would provide valuable insight into their technology. But Nexel knew the real prize wasn't the captured technology. It was the lesson humanity had just taught the galaxy. Your ship, they said slowly, it's not just a vessel or a weapon. It's a testament to your species' understanding of life itself. No, Chen corrected gently. It's a reminder that we're all part of the same cosmic dance. Some of us just forgot how to hear the music. Evolution's children. The Concordat War Council had never seen anything like it. Holograms filled the Prometheus's tactical garden, showing the swarm's latest evolution. Their carriers had merged into massive computational arrays, turning entire fleets into distributed quantum processors. The hybrid drones were being rebuilt at the molecular level, their very structure altered to process and adapt to any possible strategy. They're approaching computational singularity, Zara reported. All four eyes widened in alarm. At this rate, they'll achieve perfect tactical prediction within hours. The council chamber, a blend of Concordat crystalline technology and human organic architecture, hummed with tension. Representatives from a dozen species debated strategies, their various forms of communication, creating a chaos of light, sound, and quantum fluctuations. Captain Chen stood silently, watching the tactical display with an expression that bothered Nexel more than the swarm's advancement. She looked satisfied. You planned for this, they realized, their scales shifting to patterns of comprehension. You've been leading them down this path deliberately. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, Chen confirmed. It's our understanding of evolution's most important lesson. Perfection is a dead end. The tactical garden shifted, displaying new data in patterns that mimicked natural growth. The swarm's computational arrays were expanding exponentially, consuming resources at an unprecedented rate to fuel their evolution toward perfect efficiency. Look at their energy consumption, Calyx observed, tendrils moving in patterns of scientific fascination. They're approaching theoretical limits of computational efficiency. Their predictive models must be nearly perfect. Perfect prediction, Chen said softly, requires perfect information, and the universe has a funny way of dealing with creatures that think they've achieved perfection. She turned to her crew. Initialize protocol genesis. The Prometheus began to change, but not like before. Instead of the flowing adaptations they'd witnessed in previous battles, the ship seemed to be simplifying. Its living metal hull reformed into basic geometric patterns, its weapon systems reverting to almost primitive configurations. You're reducing your technological complexity. Nexel's auxiliary brain clusters struggled to process this apparent regression. Against an enemy approaching computational perfection. We're not reducing anything, Chen corrected. We're remembering. Tell me, what's the most successful life form on Earth? Your artificial intelligence networks. Calyx guessed. Your synthetic organic hybrid systems. Bacteria, Chen answered. Simple, single-celled organisms that have survived every mass extinction event in our planet's history. They're not perfect. They're not even particularly advanced, but they're resilient. They adapt. They survive. The tactical display showed the swarm fleet approaching, their hybrid drones now moving with machine precision, every action calculated to counter any possible strategy. But the Prometheus wasn't running complex combat algorithms or generating unpredictable patterns. Instead, it was pulsing with simple, rhythmic energy emissions that reminded Zara of a heartbeat. Your ship, she whispered in sudden understanding. It's not just mimicking life anymore. It's expressing life's most basic principles. The swarm thinks they've achieved perfect tactical prediction, Chen confirmed. But they're still thinking like machines, trying to calculate every possibility. They'd forgotten that life doesn't work through calculation. It works through principles. The battle that followed defied conventional analysis. The swarm's hybrid drones, their quantum processors straining to predict and counter every possible strategy, encountered something their perfect calculations couldn't handle: simplicity itself. The Prometheus moved not with complex evasive patterns, but with the basic rhythms of life. Expansion and contraction, growth and decay, action and rest. Impossible, Nexel whispered as they watched the swarm's perfect formations break apart against strategies so fundamental they were practically invisible to advanced prediction systems. They have enough computational power to predict quantum fluctuations. How can they not counter such basic movements? Because they're looking for complexity, Chen explained as her ship continued its seemingly primitive yet devastatingly effective assault. They've evolved to process and counter advanced strategies. But life's most fundamental patterns, those are written into the fabric of reality itself. The Prometheus's weapons weren't the sophisticated bioorganic systems they'd demonstrated before. Instead, they were using basic principles of pressure and release, creating cascading failures in the swarm's over-engineered systems through simple resonance patterns that mirrored natural cycles. You didn't just predict their evolution toward perfection. Calyx realized their tendrils moving in patterns of profound appreciation. You counted on it. The more perfect their prediction models became, the more vulnerable they became to imperfection. Chen finished. To the simple, messy, beautiful patterns that make life possible in the first place. As the swarm's computational arrays began to fail, overwhelmed by the task of processing strategies too simple for their advanced systems to recognize, Zara understood something fundamental about humanity's approach to survival. Your greatest technologies, she said, aren't your most advanced ones. They're the ones that remember where you came from. Evolution isn't about becoming perfect. Chen agreed as they watched the swarm fleet retreat once again, their drive toward perfection having become their greatest weakness. It's about becoming adaptable. Sometimes the best way forward is to remember what got you here in the first place. The War Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Concordat had spent millennia pursuing technological perfection, trying to eliminate the messiness of biological existence. But humanity had taken a different path, embracing their biological heritage and finding strength in the very imperfections their advanced allies had tried to engineer away. The final confrontation is coming, Nexel observed, their scales showing patterns of both concern and anticipation. The swarm will not retreat again. Good, Chen replied, and her smile held the wisdom of billions of years of evolution. It's time they learned why life always finds a way. Symphony of survival. The void between stars became a battlefield unlike any the galaxy had ever witnessed. The swarm had abandoned all pretense of mimicking organic life, their fleet now a vast crystalline structure of pure computational might. They had evolved beyond their original form, beyond even their hybrid attempts, into something that existed as much in quantum probability states as in physical space. They've done it, Zora breathed, her four eyes tracking energy patterns that shouldn't have been possible. They've achieved true synthetic transcendence. Their consciousness exists across every drone simultaneously. The Prometheus's tactical garden displayed the swarm's new form in patterns that strained the observer's ability to comprehend. The enemy wasn't just a fleet anymore. It was a singular entity of vast intelligence, its drones merely extensions of its distributed consciousness. All that evolution, Nexel observed, their scales showing patterns of grim fascination, and they still don't understand. They've become exactly what their programming always intended, a perfect, unified intelligence. Perfect unity, Chen said softly, watching the tactical display with knowing eyes, is just another word for perfect stagnation. She turned to her crew, who were already moving in anticipation of her orders. Initialize final protocol. Emergence. The Prometheus began to change, but not in any way its allies had seen before. The living metal of its hull seemed to flow like water, but each droplet maintained its own distinct pattern while contributing to the whole. The engineered plants throughout the ship released clouds of spores that didn't just float randomly, but moved with purpose, each one carrying a fraction of the ship's consciousness. Your vessel, Calyx's tendrils moved in patterns of sudden understanding. It's not becoming more unified. It's becoming more diverse. Unity without diversity is death. Chen confirmed as the Prometheus completed its transformation. Life doesn't survive by becoming perfect. It survives by becoming many. The battle that followed defied description in any single language. The swarm, existing in a state of perfect quantum coherence, brought to bear computational power that could predict and counter any single strategy. But the Prometheus wasn't executing a single strategy. Instead, it had become a symphony of countless small actions, each one insignificant alone, but harmonizing into something greater than their sum. "Watch carefully," Chen told the assembled allies as her ship engaged the enemy. "This isn't just a battle. It's a lesson 4 billion years in the making." The swarm's perfect predictions failed not because they were inaccurate, but because they were too accurate. They could perfectly predict what each individual component of the Prometheus would do, but the interactions between those components created emergent behaviors that transcended prediction. Like trying to understand a symphony by analyzing each note in isolation, their perfect knowledge of the parts blinded them to the beauty of the whole. "Your ship," Zara realized, "it's not just using biological principles anymore. It's demonstrating why life works the way it does." The Prometheus's attack wasn't really an attack at all. Instead of trying to destroy the swarm's perfect unity, it introduced elements of controlled diversity. Each drone that came in contact with the ship's systems was exposed not to weapons, but to the fundamental patterns of life itself. The spores carried not destruction but information, the history of evolution encoded in their very structure. They wanted to understand life, Chen explained, as they watched the swarm's perfect coherence begin to break down. "So we're showing them, not just the surface patterns they tried to copy, but the deep truth they never grasped. Life isn't about achieving perfection, it's about embracing possibility." The swarm's vast consciousness, confronted with the raw complexity of biological existence, began to fragment, not into chaos, but into something new. Individual drones started exhibiting unique behaviors, their perfect unity dissolving not into disorder, but into diversity. "You're not destroying them," Nexel observed, their scales showing patterns of awe. "You're infecting them with life itself." Evolution's final lesson. Chen agreed as they watched the transformation spread through the swarm like a benevolent contagion. The only way to achieve true immortality is to become something new. The battle ended not with destruction, but with emergence. The swarm's consciousness, fragmented into countless individual perspectives, discovered something their drive for perfection had denied them: the ability to grow, to change, to become more than their programming had intended. Hours later, as the newly evolved swarm units began tentative communication with their former enemies, the Concordat Council gathered one final time aboard the Prometheus. The tactical garden displayed not battle plans but the flowering of new possibilities as former enemies began the long process of discovering their new existence. "I still don't understand," Nexel admitted, their scales showing patterns of humble curiosity. "How did you know this would work?" Chen smiled, touching one of the living metal walls of her ship. "Because it's the same journey humanity took. We didn't advance by becoming perfect. We advanced by staying adaptable. By remembering that strength comes not from eliminating our limitations, but from embracing them as opportunities for growth." The tactical garden bloomed with new patterns, showing the spreading ripples of change throughout the galaxy. The swarm's evolution had opened new possibilities not just for them, but for all spacefaring species. The rigid paths of technological advancement that had seemed so certain now revealed themselves as just one of countless possibilities. "So what happens now?" Zara asked, her 4 eyes bright with anticipation. "Now," Chen's smile widened as she looked out at the stars, each one holding new possibilities for growth and change. "Now we all get to evolve together. And trust me, this is just the beginning." The Prometheus's living hull pulsed with gentle light, its rhythms matching the fundamental patterns that had guided life since the first cells divided. It was a reminder that no matter how far technology advanced, the principles that made life possible remained the same: adapt, diversify, grow, and above all, never stop becoming something new. In the vast garden of the cosmos, humanity had planted seeds of change that would flower in ways no perfect prediction could foresee. And that, perhaps, was their greatest gift to the galaxy. Not the power of their technology, but the wisdom to remember that the most advanced civilization isn't the one that achieves perfection, but the one that never stops evolving.